英國嘅 Oxford 嘅Hindu Study Centre 係一個印度教嘅文化嘅研究嘅中心嗰度咧，佢開展咗一個博伽雅談嘅一個嘅項目。咁去到南印度啦，去到舉辦一啲嘅研討會啦，聚集唔同嘅聖典博伽雅談嘅學者啦，希望咧將呢一部嘅經典咧可以令到更加多嘅世人去到認識，更加多人能夠獲益。咁我哋今日非常之榮幸可以一齊喺呢一度咧聆聽呢一個嘅甘露。我哋用熱烈嘅哈利波去歡迎馬哈松話哈利波 ，Welcome Guru Maharaj。
Hari Bol indeed. I'm happy to be here. I guess I should speak into the microphone. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Something like that. Happy to be back in holy Hong Kong.
好開心咧，翻到嚟呢一個嘅神聖嘅香港。
Something
holy.
So, and thank you all for coming to this event.
好多謝大家嚟到參與今日呢一個嘅節目。
In which we will discuss the Bhagavatam, Srimad-Bhagavatam, which I think you're all familiar with in many ways.
咁我哋一齊會去到咧一齊去到認識啦呢一部嘅經典咧聖典博伽雅談。咁我相信可能在座某啲朋友都對佢有啲嘅認識。
But Bhagavatam is, we can always hear something more about the Bhagavatam.
但係咧聖典博伽雅談咧，我哋咧可以咧每一次都會聽到啲新嘅嘢㗎。
We say for Vaishnavas any excuse to have a festival, similarly any excuse to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam.
咁所以對於一個 Vaishnava 嚟咧係有無盡無窮嘅原因理由可以咧去到過節啦，亦都可以咧係去到聆聽博伽雅談。
But first, Jaya Radha Madhava.
咁我哋開始之前先唱一首歌 Jaya Radha Madhava。
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjani Hari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjani Hari Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Yamuna Tira Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Oh, look.
I give you this one.
I like this one.
Back to school.
Back in school. Maybe, let's see. What if we... put this here. Oops.
Spray on.
Cause a problem. Like this. And yeah,
Recording.
something like this. Okay. Good. I can learn the alphabet.
Hơi hỏi
ABC. So we're doing back and forth translation. Okay. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Vishatarine Vancha Kalpataruyascha Kripa Sindhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. It's been announced that we will do an overview of the Srimad-Bhagavatam.
咁咧喺嗰個公佈裏面咧講到咧，我哋今日會講呢一個博家雅談嘅概覽。
This is what in English we call a tall order.
Tall order.
A tall order means a big challenge.
咁咧喺英文咧話好高嘅一個梯級啊，意思即係好難做到嘅一件事情。
Because the Bhagavatam is a very extensive shastra.
因為博家雅談咧係一部嘅經典啦，係非常之廣大嘅。
And the word shastra is significant. There are two words. One is shastra with a long a, and the other is shastra with a short short long shastra shastra。
咁咧shastra 呢個字咧都有兩個發音嘅，一個就係長嘅A 音，一個就係短嘅。
It is said that we should follow Shastra because if we do not follow Shastra, then if we are not controlled by Shastra, then we will be controlled by Shastra.
咁有個講法咧，就話咧，如果我哋不受呢一個嘅 shastra 去到控制嘅話咧，我哋就會俾 shastra 即係短嗰個音咧就會控制。Father?
The speaker is above you, so you can move either. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't stay above the speaker.
You can come closer this way. No?
Oh, is the speaker?
The speaker is there, I think.
Really?
Stay away from the speaker.
But
Stay away from the speaker.
Okay, try.
Yeah, Shastra means weapon.
咁 shastra 嘅意思咧就係武器。Can 唔使 OK。武器嘅意思。
武器。We don't want to be controlled by weapons.
咁所以呢個短音嘅 shastra 咧武器咧，我哋係唔想被佢控制嘅。
In other words, we don't want to be controlled by external force.
意思即係話咧，我哋唔想被外在嘅一啲嘅力量所去到控制。
So if we don't want to be controlled by such force, then the alternative is to allow ourselves to be controlled by internal force, internal direction, which externally manifests as Shastra.
咁所以如果我哋唔想俾呢個外在嘅武器力量咧所去控制咧，我哋咧就需要咧去到進入咧我哋內在嘅呢一股嘅力量，而佢嘅顯化喺外在咧就係呢一啲嘅經典啦。
But then we have a question, which Shastra? Because there's so many, there's such a wide, there's an ocean of Shastra.
咁就會產生一個問題啦，就係有海洋嘅般嘅呢一啲嘅經典，咁係邊一部經典呢？
There's a whole elaborate book explaining why the Srimad-Bhagavatam is the best of all Shastras, written by Srila Jiva Goswami.
咁呢一位聖人 Srila Jiva Goswami 咧寫咗一本書，去到解釋咧點解聖典博伽雅壇咧係所有嘅經典中咧係最好、最崇高嘅。
It's a highly analytical study called the Tattva Sandarbha.
咁係非常之分析性嘅深入嘅一個嘅一本書嚟嘅，叫做 Tattva Sandarbha。Tattva 真理。
And I'll save you the trouble of reading that book.
咁咧，我已經幫大家讀咗呢本書啦。
By saying the conclusion of the book is the best book, the best Shastra to read is the Srimad-Bhagavatam.
咁睇完之後，我嘅結論就係喺所有嘅經典文獻裏面咧，最好嘅最佳嘅 ，OK 就係咧呢一本嘅博伽雅壇咯，去到閱讀。
Yes, so take my word for it. Jiva Goswami tells us this is.
大家要相信我講嘅説話係 Jiva Goswami 講嘅。
There's one of many reasons why the Bhagavatam is best is explained in this way.
咁有好多嘅原因咧，點解博伽雅壇咧係最佳嘅、最優秀嘅？其中一個原因。
Vedam Puranam Kavyam Cha Prabhur Mitram Priyeva Cha Bodhayanti Tihi Prahus Trivrit Bhagavatam Punaha, which means that the Vedas, the Puranas, and Kavya, which means poetry, give us direction, give us shastric direction in 3 different styles.
咁講到咧呢一個嘅偉達經啦、往世書啦，同埋一啲嘅詩啦，咁咧佢俾一啲嘅經典嘅有經典裏面有3個嘅方向俾咗我哋。
The Veda gives us direction like a Prabhu, like a master, like a king, commanding.
咁偉達經咧就好似一個嘅國王 ，OK 一個主人咧，佢就咧去發號施令嘅。
The Puranas give us direction like Mitra, like a friend.
咁往世書咧俾我哋呢啲嘅方向咧，就好似一個朋友 Mitra。
And Kavya gives us direction like a beloved.
咁呢啲詩篇咧俾我哋方向咧，就好似一個愛人咁樣。
And the Bhagavatam gives us all 3 styles.
咁但係博伽雅壇咧就包含晒呢3種嘅方式嘅風格。
Everything is there in the Bhagavatam.
咁所以咧，所有嘅一切都包含喺博伽雅壇裏面。
Most popular portion of the Bhagavatam is the 10th of the 12 skandhas or cantos, because it's telling the life story of Lord Krishna.
博伽雅壇係好大嘅一個嘅比重咧，就係喺第10篇。咁咧第10篇咧就係描述咧主 Krishna 嘅佢嘅佢嘅一生，佢嘅生平。
And many people more or less ignore the first 9 cantos and they go to the 10th canto.
咁好多人就會咧跳咗前面嗰9篇啦，就直接咧去睇第10篇喎。
But Srila Prabhupada warns us that this will not be a good idea because we will not properly understand the 10th canto unless we get the first 9 lessons.
咁但係聖巴帕咧就去到即係提醒我哋，就唔可以咧跳過頭嗰9篇，因為咧頭嗰9篇咧其實幫助我哋咧能夠去理解第10篇。
In Oxford, we have one very nice professor now retired, who was very helpful in very instrumental in getting our center started, our Center for Hindu Studies. So, director of our center, Shonakarishi Prabhu, wanted to express his gratitude. He gave him a full set of Bhagavatams as a gift.
咁喺牛津大學嗰度咧，有一位教授而家已經退咗休噶啦。咁佢好致力去到即係去到推動呢一個嘅中心研究印度文化嘅中心嘅發展啦。咁呢一個中心嘅主管啦，就送咗一套嘅博伽雅壇俾佢。
So this professor, some days or weeks later, he came to the center. And he was expressing appreciation for the Bhagavatam.
咁呢一位退休嘅教授咧，咁過咗幾日咧，佢就嚟到去到多謝即係送俾佢呢一套嘅博伽雅壇。
And he was explaining, I started reading the first canto.
咁佢就講啦，我開始睇第1篇。
And in the first canto, I read Srila Prabhupada's warning. Do not jump to the 10th canto.
咁喺第1篇嘅時候咧，我已經睇到聖帕帕咧嘅警告嘅就係唔好直接跳到去第10篇。
So when I read that, I couldn't resist. I jumped right to the 10th canto.
咁所以當我睇到呢句説話之後咧，我忍唔住，我即刻就去第10篇睇下咩嚟嘅。
Anyway, some devotees, they think, oh, the 10th canto, it is so exalted, we shouldn't read it at all.
有啲奉獻者咧會覺得哇，第10篇實在太過高深啦，我唔應該去睇嘅。
No, that's the opposite idea, and that is also a misunderstanding.
咁但係呢個又係頭先嗰個例子嘅另外一個相反，另外一個極端。
Because it's in the 10th canto that we meet, of course, Krishna, but we also meet Krishna's most exalted devotees.
因為喺第10篇咧，我哋遇到嘅唔單止係 Krishna 咧，而且咧仲有咧佢最崇高嘅奉獻者。
From whom we learn what is the highest limits of pure devotion to the Lord.
從佢嗰度咧，我哋去到認識到咧呢一個純粹嘅對於純粹嘅奉愛嘅極限。
In the year 1932, I believe it was, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, announced that he would be speaking on the Bhagavatam, and the place he would speak was Radha Kunda.
喺1932年嘅時候咧，聖巴帕嘅靈性導師啦，Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur咧喺Radha Kund 呢一個嘅地方咧，去到講述博伽雅壇。
And devotees came, they expected, they anticipated, oh, he is speaking, just look where he is speaking. So he will certainly speak on these very intimate, exalted pastimes from 10th canto.
所以嗰啲門徒咧就諗住，師父一定係去到講一啲嘅即係關於嗰個地方啦，非常之即係深入嘅呢一啲嘅逍遙時光。
So he started with Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, text 1.
咁咧佢當日咧去到講嘅《博伽雅談》咧就係第一篇第一章嘅第一個詩節。
And second day, he continued with Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1.
咁咧第二日咧都係繼續講第一篇第一章第一個詩節。
And he continued for 1 month,
一個月
speaking
嘅時
only on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1.
整整一個月時間都係講同一篇章嘅同一個詩節。
Srila Prabhupada, many years later, he said, you could spend 1 month on any one of the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam.
咁聖爸爸講過咧，你可以用一個月嘅時間去到咧閱讀呢一個18000個詩節裏面嘅任何一個詩節，整部《博伽雅談》18000個詩節。
And he said, basically, do the math. How long is it going to take you to go through the Bhagavatam?
咁你計數過，你諗係睇晒整部嘅《博伽雅談》要幾多嘅時間？
So I'm thinking, how are we going to make an overview of the Bhagavatam in 2 hours?
所以我諗緊點樣可以喺2個鐘之內就可以去到概述呢一部《博伽雅談》。
And I'm reminded of a story I heard just a few days ago in Braj. One of the priests of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Nandagram told me something about one of his, maybe his great-grandfather.
咁就係幾日之前啊，我喺印度係 Braj 呢一個嘅聖地啦。咁喺一間廟 Krishna Balaram 廟喺 Nandagram 呢個地方咧，咁有一位嘅祭司咧就同我描述咗佢嘅可能曾曾祖父講嘅説話。
So his great-grandfather one time was invited to speak katha, to tell stories of Srimati Radharani for 7 days. They were wanting him to speak for 7 days on Srimati Radharani.
咁佢嘅曾祖父咧就被邀請咧7日嘅時間，OK， 連續咧係去到咧講述關於Srimati Radharani 嘅故事。
So, first day he spoke on the glories of Lord Shri Krishna.
第一日咧佢所講咧就係主 Krishna 嘅榮耀。
And the second day, more on the glories of Lord Shri Krishna.
咁第二日咧又繼續講咧主 Krishna 嘅榮耀。
And the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and sixth, and seventh days, only he spoke about Lord Shri Krishna.
咁之後嘅第3、4、5、6、7日咧都係描述主 Krishna 嘅榮耀。
And at the end, the devotees were expressing gratitude, but they said very politely, Goswami Ji, could you say something about Srimati Radharani?
咁去到最後嗰一日咧，咁啲奉獻者就好有禮貌咧，就請呢一位嘅佢哋叫Goswami Ji，佢話你可唔可以講少少關於 Krishna 嘅愛女 Srimati Radharani？
So he said, oh yes.
佢話好啊。
Srimati Radharani is that person to whom Lord Shri Krishna offers his prostrate obeisances.
咁佢就講咗呢句説話，佢話咧Srimati Radharani 咧係主 Krishna 咧會向佢咧致意呢個五體投地嘅頂拜。
And that's all he said.
就完咗啦。
But he made the point of her glories by glorifying Krishna is so exalted in so many ways, and he is offering obeisance to her.
咁佢嘅用意咧就係佢去到描述 Krishna 嘅榮耀係幾咁崇高 ，Krishna 係幾咁崇高，但係咧最終咧佢講佢都要向 Srimati Radharani 去到致意頂拜啊，所以你可以睇到 Srimati Radharani 嘅地位係幾咁崇高。
So, overviewing the Bhagavatam. Well, this is this was the attempt in this small book, which is what's called an edited volume. It's a collection of articles thematically overviewing the Bhagavatam, which myself and my good friend and colleague Radhika Raman Prabhu put together some years ago.
咁咧呢度有一本書咧，其實係唔同嘅一啲嘅文章咧，去到結集而成嘅。咁咧我就裡面有我嘅文章咧，亦都有我嘅幫手嘅編輯咯。咁裡面就係我同我嘅好朋友同埋同事咧，係 Radhika Raman Prabhu 咧係一齊去到將佢結合而成嘅，係以一啲主題為主題式咁樣去到呈現嘅。
And so I thought maybe we can sort of look at some of these themes in this book, and in this way, this may be one way we can overview the Bhagavatam.
咁或者我哋可以按住呢本書嘅脈絡，可以去到聽一聽裡面嘅主題，咁咧就做一個概覽。
But maybe before that, maybe I should ask, not to embarrass anyone, but who has read the entire 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam? Anyone?
在場有冇邊一位睇晒整部嘅博家雅談啊？12篇。
I listened to the whole.
Huh?
I listened to the whole.
You listened? Ah, yes.
Srimad-Bhagavatam
Bharati Goswami has been making audio recordings of the entire. Yes, nice. So you've heard the whole 12 cantos. Very good.
聽晒12篇。
Okay. Well, I don't know. I suppose we could go and say, all right, who has read the first canto?
邊個睇過第一篇嘅？
Some are going like. Yes, first canto.
Questions. Read but not necessarily remember.
Remembering is another thing. Yeah. First, second canto.
第2篇。
The number of hands reduces. Okay, I better not go too much further.
唔好再問落去啦。
Otherwise it gets too embarrassing. 10th canto?
第10篇咧。
Krishna book.
Krishna 快樂的泉源嘅一本
Yes,
書。
Krishna book is good. Krishna book is, Srila Prabhupada called it his summary study of the 10th canto.
咁聖巴巴咧將Krishna book 即係 Krishna 快樂的泉源中文咧就係第10篇嘅一個嘅精華。
Which he wrote after explaining that one should not jump over the first 9 cantos. Then he composed this Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he did so because he wanted to make sure at least this would be available, not knowing how long he would still have to live.
因為聖巴巴當時唔知道自己仲會喺呢個世上幾耐啦，所以咧佢先就做咗呢一本書Krishna 快樂的泉源。
And in many ways he sort of draws into that summary study essential ideas from especially first and second cantos. Yeah.
Mean the summary and then the
He brings
canto.
into his summary study points from.
Okay, canto 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Okay， 咁咧就係將第1篇同埋第2篇裏面嘅一啲嘅重點咧就擺咗落去呢一個 Krishna book 嗰度。
So okay, good. How many of you have the set of Srimad-Bhagavatam?
在座邊一位有一套嘅博家雅談嘅？
Good, good. Okay. You're not having chance.
我爭11、12。
Still for the Chinese version,
Yeah.
we don't have the 11 and 12.
not available yet.
Simplify 簡體係咪啊？
我冇簡體啊。
Oh yeah, maybe simplify.
I have poor English, therefore I can't.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's good. Yes. Of course, it's nice to have the Bhagavatam in your home, even if it's only partial.
咁就算係有部分嘅博家雅談都係好嘅，喺屋企裏面。
But sometimes we may think, yes, I have it, it's on my shelf.
有陣時候係啊，我係有啊，不過喺個書架上面啊。
It's all very neatly
擺得好靚。
And I keep the dust off.
有時都會幫佢抹下塵。
Yeah, that's nice, but it's also the idea is to read.
咁當然擺喺度好好睇啦，但係其實係要去到睇，打開本書去睇。
And I always find it helpful to remember how much effort Srila Prabhupada put into translating and composing his commentary.
我成日都會諗啊，聖帕帕咧係擺咗好多嘅心血咧，係去到翻譯啦，同埋去到編撰聖典博家雅談嘅要旨。
As perhaps all of you know, he would translate in the very early morning hours. He would get up 1 o'clock, sometimes even earlier, when everyone was asleep, and he would translate for at least 2 hours every morning, no matter what the circumstances, no matter he was traveling.
無論任何嘅狀況之下啦，甚至可能喺度旅遊啦，咁聖帕帕咧都會每一日凌晨1點鐘咁樣，或者有時更早啦。當所有人都喺度瞓緊覺嘅時候咧，佢就至少花2個鐘頭嘅時間咧，係喺博家雅談嗰度去到工作翻譯。
And he referred to his purports as his ecstasies. He was feeling from the verse, he would be inspired, and that inspiration, which also referred to the commentaries of previous acharyas as his personal ecstasies.
咁所以聖帕帕當佢去到做呢一啲嘅翻譯或者落呢啲嘅要旨嘅時候咧，佢會稱為咧係佢嘅一種嘅狂喜啊！咁咧，當佢睇到嗰啲詩字嘅時候咧，佢就會得到呢一個嘅靈感，再加上以往嘅靈性嘅先師啦所落嘅呢啲嘅要旨，去到聚集埋一齊。
When we were preparing this collection of articles, we wondered how to organize it, and we came to the idea of having basically 2 sections, 2 parts.
所以當我哋去到即係去到編呢一本書嘅時候咧，我哋諗緊點樣去到設計佢啦，咁咧就將佢分為2個嘅部分。
The first part is called The World of the Bhagavatam, and the second part is called The Bhagavatam in the World.
第一個部分咧就係博家雅談嘅世界，而第二個部分咧就係呢一個世界裡面嘅博家雅談。博家雅講好快。
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Because we realize there's 2 things. There's the world of the Bhagavatam. In other words, the text itself, the world that we kind of enter into when we read the Bhagavatam.
咁所以第一個部分咧就係博家雅談裡面所展現嘅世界。當我哋讀博家雅談嘅時候咧，其實我哋進入博家雅談嘅世界裡面。
And at the same time, the Bhagavatam has had effect in the visible and in the world, in the tangible, in the phenomenal world.
同一時間咧，博家雅談喺呢一個我哋能夠見到嘅世界，亦都有佢嘅位置。
And so we wanted to have something to say about both aspects of the Bhagavatam.
咁所以想兩邊都去到講解一下。 即係博加雅壇嘅世界啦，同埋博加雅壇喺呢個世界所產生嘅作用。
And just many times I've seen when you give someone a book, instead of going, I always go to the front of the book to see, okay, what's in the table of contents.
咁我每次我就攞到本書嘅時候咧，我會先會睇一睇個目錄嘅。
But I've seen so many people, you give them a book and they'll go like this. They'll start from the back.
但係有啲人咧拎咗本書咧，佢就會由後面開始睇起。
I think they're looking for pictures first.
應該想揾啲畫或者圖片。
Actually, Srila Prabhupada very much emphasized he wanted pictures, paintings in his editions of the Bhagavatam.
咁聖巴巴咧好強調咧，佢好想咧喺博加雅壇裏面咧係包含一啲嘅畫像嘅。
Initially, he wanted a picture on every second or third page. He wanted lots of illustration.
咁佢想每一幾頁咧就會有一幅嘅圖畫，有呢啲嘅圖畫嘅一啲嘅圖解。
But that's kind of another subject. But considering how some read books backwards, so I want to mention the final article. It's in this category of the Bhagavatam in the world.
咁我哋由後面先睇起啦，就係最後嘅一章咧，就係講到博加雅壇喺呢一個世界。
And so this final chapter by two devotee scholars is called Modern Reception and Text Migration of the Bhagavata Purana.
Modern Reception and Text Migration.
Yes.
OK， 咁呢一篇咧就係由兩位奉獻者嘅學者所寫嘅，咁咧就係講到呢一個嘅現代嘅世界點樣去到接受呢個博加雅壇啦，同埋呢一個嘅經典啊，呢啲嘅文字啊，點樣係移植去到另外一個地方。
And it's a kind of history of how the Bhagavatam migrated from India to the West.
咁所以其實有少少關於歷史嘅博加雅壇呢個經典點樣由印度啦去到移植去到呢個西方。
But they start the story all the way back to the 8th century with Shankaracharya.
咁個故事咧就係由8世紀開始講起。
And then they go through the Vaishnavacharyas, Ramanuja, Madhva, and then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
咁由 Shankaracharya 咧一直去到Vaishnava 呢個傳統嘅靈性嘅先師啦，跟住一直去到住財坦耶。
And then they talk about the Bhagavatam still in India in the 19th century.
講到去喺19世紀博加雅壇喺印度。
How the Indian intellectuals were embarrassed by the Bhagavatam.
當時嘅印度嘅一啲知識分子咧係以博加雅壇覺得係尷尬。Embarrassed, like,
Yeah.
They, okay.
So that's a whole story. I won't get into that. They were trying to be sort of more British than the British.
佢哋就係因為崇洋啊，即係崇拜呢個英國嘅文化，所以覺得以博加雅壇為恥。
And then at the same time, the Bhagavatam came in one edition to the West into a French translation in 1840.
1840嘅時候咧，咁博加雅壇咧就去咗法國喎，有法國嘅譯本嘅，法文嘅譯本。
And then a very important personality for preparing the way was our own Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
咁之後將博伽亞談去到再去到發揚光大咧，就係我哋嘅 Bhaktivinoda Thakur。
Bhaktivinoda Thakur was writing to defend the Bhagavatam against those who were embarrassed by it.
咁 Bhaktivinoda Thakur 咧係去到捍衛博伽亞談啊，即係有啲人以博伽亞談為恥啦，但係 Bhaktivinoda Thakur 咧就係去到保護、去到捍衛佢。
And there's a wonderful essay he wrote in 1869 defending the Bhagavatam.
其中有一篇嘅文章咧，佢寫到咧去到捍衛博伽亞談咧係1869年嘅時候。
And in that essay he says, even if all the Vedic literature minus the Bhagavatam would be burned, and he gives the example of the Library of Alexandria. Even if it would all be burned, if we have the Bhagavatam, there would be no loss.
咁佢就話咧就算整個偉大文獻嘅圖書館啊 ，OK 被燒成灰燼好，剩翻博伽亞談都冇損失嘅。OK， 最緊要有呢部經典留低。
Yeah, so he was writing very dramatically like that.
咁所以佢係好即係佢寫嘅時候係好戲劇化嘅。
So it's that background from which Srila Prabhupada composed his translation, English translation and commentary.
咁就係呢一個嘅背景之下咧，聖巴巴咧就為博伽亞談去到翻譯啦，同埋落評注。
Prabhupada's was not the first translation into English. I mentioned this French, but then there was an English translation.
所以聖巴巴嘅翻譯咧並唔係第一個翻譯嚟嘅，之前有法文嘅翻譯啦，亦都有英文嘅翻譯嘅。
And there was one scholar in America who he decided he was doing his doctoral study, I think at Harvard University, and he decided he would make the Bhagavatam his subject. He would study the Bhagavatam.
咁喺哈佛大學裏面有一位嘅學者啦，佢就想做博伽亞談為佢研究嘅主題。
His name was Thomas Hopkins. He just died maybe 1 year ago.
咁呢一位學者係可能1年前離開咗身體嘅。
So he found 2 editions in 2 different university libraries of the Bhagavatam.
咁佢喺大學嘅圖書館裏面咧揾到有博伽亞談嘅2個嘅版本。
And one day he visited New York in sometime in the late 1960s. He came to Srila Prabhupada's center, preaching center on 26th 2nd Avenue.
1960
Maybe 1969, I'm not sure.
可能1960年代尾啦，咁咧佢就去到紐約泡泡嘅聖泡泡嘅一個嘅傳教嘅中心。
And he came in this little storefront in sort of downtown Manhattan, and there was a table, maybe like this, and on the table there were copies of Srila Prabhupada's first canto Bhagavatam, 3 volumes.
咁佢就係去到嗰個有個好似個鋪面嗰度啦。咁咧入去嘅時候咧，就見到張台上面咧就放住聖巴帕嘅博伽亞談嘅第一篇，有3部嘅。
And he was amazed.
佢非常之驚訝。
Wow, there's the Bhagavatam. Amazing.
係啊，居然喺呢一
He was
度
so excited.
見到博伽亞談，非常之興奮。
And there was one young man, one devotee was taking care of he was present in the room, and later Professor Hopkins asked this young man, he said, so your guru, Bhaktivedanta Swami, he's from Bengal?
呢一位嘅教授咧就去到嗰度就見到個博加雅壇啦，跟然之後佢就問其中一位奉獻者啦，佢話你嘅 guru Bhaktivedanta Swami 係咪孟加拉㗎嚟㗎？ Bengal 孟加拉。
Mangala? Okay. And the young man said, no, he's from India.
跟住佢話唔係啊，佢係印度嚟嘅。
He was so ignorant himself of little basic geography.
係因為太過無知啦，即係都唔知道呢一啲嘅地理嘅知識。其實孟加拉係印度嘅一部分嚟嘅。
So there's a history of how this Bhagavatam, and of course the history goes on. So many translations from the English, and then including Guangdonghua, Putonghua.
咁呢個歷史就繼續啦，去到延續啦。咁而家就有其他嘅語言嘅版本啦，有我哋嘅簡體啊、繁體。
And all of this because Srila Prabhupada so much, especially he wanted to have the Bhagavatam available.
佢好希望咧Prabhupada嘅願望，好希望咧博加雅壇咧係可以令到越嚟越多人能夠去到接觸到。
Of course, Bhagavad Gita is so essential as well, and very much of Prabhupada's speaking, preaching was from Bhagavad Gita.
咁當然博加雅壇、博加梵歌亦都係非常之核心嘅。咁好多時候聖巴帕都會去到講述啊、傳播博加梵歌嘅知識。
Many times Prabhupada would say the Bhagavad Gita is the ABCs of spiritual life.
聖巴帕好多時候會講話博加梵歌咧係靈性生命嘅 ABC。
I'm reminded of this because I have a lesson in front of me.
因為我前面嗰張台上面有字母表。
And Bhagavad Gita brings us to that point of a decision, like Arjuna. Arjuna is being persuaded by Krishna to engage in devotional service.
咁博加梵歌咧就係令到我哋要做一個嘅決定啊，就好似阿 Arjuna 咁樣，去到最後咧係帶領嘅咧佢去到從事奉愛嘅服務。
So it brings us to, we say in English, it brings us to square one. It brings us to the starting line.
咁所以博加梵歌咧帶我哋咧去到呢個起點。
起點。
Starting point.
Yeah, it's the point where we say, okay, yes, let me try this devotional service, bhakti yoga.
咁所以呢個起點咧就係好，我去到試下去行呢一條路，就係咧奉愛瑜伽、奉愛服務。
So now what? What do I do now? Here, take this book, Srimad-Bhagavatam.
好啦，咁你做咗呢個決定要開始啦，咁你點咧就攞呢一套嘅書，聖典博加雅壇。
Because this is how we enter into, essentially we enter into the Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, the ocean of the nectar of devotion.
咁我哋就係進入呢一個嘅奉愛嘅甘露嘅海洋。
Because the introduction in the Bhagavatam says, Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavuka. O relishers, O you who have some fine taste, relish the Bhagavatam.
咁喺雅壇嘅開始嘅時候有個詩節咧，就係講到去到識得去到品嚐博加雅壇嘅人，或者對博加雅壇有啲品味嘅人。
Which points to, going back to what I mentioned before, Vedam Puranam Kavyam Cha Prabhur Mitra Priyeva Cha. It's pointing to the Priya, to the expression or the teaching through the beloved.
咁就翻去頭先我哋一開始講嘅時候咧，就係呢一個嘅教導咧係嗰個愛侶啊所給予嘅呢個教導。
So the beloved is the one who really cares about us and therefore gives us good advice, but in a very sweet way.
咁呢個嘅愛侶，呢個愛人咧，佢真係去到關心我哋，咁咧佢咧就去到給予我哋呢啲嘅知識咧，但係咧用嗰啲好甜美嘅方法。
He or she says, "My dear."
咁呢個愛人咧就話：我親愛嘅
Wouldn't you like to do like this?
不如你試下咁樣做啦，
Because it will be so nice.
因為係好好㗎。
So like that, the Bhagavatam is especially emphasizing that mood.
咁《薄伽雅談》就係帶住呢一種嘅心緒。
And this is good for us because we're so accustomed to everything but spiritual life. We're so accustomed to the distractions of material life.
咁其實對我哋好好嘅，因為我哋對於物質嘅生活啊已經習以為常啊。
So the Bhagavatam, if we now jump to the other end of this book, our first chapter, which I wrote, is about narrative. I wanted to give readers who have no idea of the Bhagavatam what sort of storytelling does the Bhagavatam do.
咁我哋翻去咧呢一本書嘅頭嘅第一章咧，就係由我去到撰寫嘅，就係想俾一啲咧對《薄伽雅談》完全冇認識嘅人，去到知道究竟呢一個嘅《薄伽雅談》裏面所講嘅故事係咩嚟嘅咧？
Because the sweetness that is offered may seem to us as bitter, like bitter medicine, and so how to get the child to eat the bitter medicine, cover it with some sweet coating.
咁我哋睇《薄伽雅談》嘅時候，有時可能就好似食藥咁樣就會苦咯。咁咧我就諗下點樣咧可以令到呢一啲嘅苦嘅藥咧食落去嘅時候咧，揾啲糖包住佢，咁食落去嘅時候就唔會咁苦啦。
So this sweetness is very much in the form of narrative stories.
咁呢一種嘅甜美咧，佢嗰種嘅展現嘅模式咧，就係呢一啲嘅故事啊。
A story, what is a story? It's once upon a time.
故事咧就係好耐以前。
Long, long ago.
好耐以前。
There was a handsome prince.
一個俊俏嘅王子。
And a beautiful princess.
美麗嘅公主。
Right? So this is how the mind immediately enters. So what happened? What happened next? What happened next?
咁所以聽到呢個描述嘅時候咧，嗰個心念咧就會諗，究竟之後點咧？之後發生啲咩事咧？
And then they lived happily ever after.
然之後就愉快美滿咁樣生活落去啦。
But of course, we understand the stories of the Bhagavatam are not just stories that are made up.
咁當然我哋知道咧，聖典《薄伽雅談》裏面所去到講述嘅呢一啲嘅故事，唔係我哋即係自己憑空去到構想嘅。
But they are episodes in the endless and unlimited bigger story, or the story of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
我哋知道咧，呢一啲故事係至尊人格守神，佢呢一啲嘅無窮無盡嘅故事裏面嘅一啲嘅唔同嘅一啲嘅環節啊。
Once Srila Prabhupada referred to the Bhagavatam like this. What is the Bhagavatam? it is the beautiful story of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
咁聖爸爸咧係會有時會用好簡單去到描述乜嘢係聖典博伽雅談咧，咁就係至尊人格守神Krishna 佢嘅一啲美麗嘅故事。
Which is a story you can read, of course, starting with Canto 1, going through the 12 cantos.
你可以由第一篇啦，慢慢咧一路咧睇到去第12篇。
And when you get to the end of Canto 12, what do you do?
咁你睇完第12篇，咁住點咧？
You don't say, okay, now I've read it, I'm finished.
咁你就唔會話我睇完啦，我完成咗啦。
You start over.
又再睇多一次。
Because it's not so much linear, it's more of a circle. It's a yantra.
因為
It's a mandala.
呢一部經典咧，好似一個 mandala， 佢咧係佢係循環咁樣嘅，佢唔係一種直線式嘅。
And as you read, as you hear, you become more and more familiar with the narratives.
咁你當你重複咁樣去到睇嘅時候咧，你就會越嚟越去到熟悉認識裡面嘅呢一啲嘅描述。
Such that you begin to imbibe the lessons which are embedded in the narratives.
然之後你就能夠去到結取裡面呢一啲嘅描述裡面嘅一啲嘅教導。
And then we're getting comments from a professional translator. No. And then what happens is we can start to have what is called Shastra Chakshus.
跟住之後我哋就會可以有呢一個經典嘅目光視域。
Shastra, yes, you're giving a translation. Yes, seeing through the eyes of Shastra, or Shastra eyes, you can say.
就係經典嘅眼光，就係睇事物嘅時候用經典嘅眼光去到睇。
Because the devotee's aim is to experience everything, to experience this world through Shastra, to be interpreting everything that happens to oneself in terms of what is spoken in Shastra, especially Bhagavatam.
所以奉獻者佢嘅體會啊，佢去到體會自己內在啦，體會呢一個世界啦，就係根據於咧呢一啲嘅經典嘅教導裡面去到認知，去到探索嘅探知。
Yeah. When we can see with the eyes of Shastra, then we're never confused.
如果當我哋有呢一個經典嘅目光嘅時候，我哋就唔會再感到疑惑。
We can see things happening and go, yes, it says like this in the Bhagavatam, so now I understand what is happening here.
咁所以當我哋有見到啲事情發生嘅時候，你就原來喺博伽雅談裏面有講，我知道究竟發生緊乜嘢事。
And then, with that vision, then we can communicate to others the same vision. We can inspire others to have a similar insight from the Bhagavatam.
咁所以當我哋有呢一個目光嘅時候咧，我哋又可以將呢一個嘅我哋得到嘅呢一啲嘅啟發咧，去啟發其他人，令到佢哋都可以有同樣嘅目光去到睇事物。
Okay, before I go into the next theme, well, let me say a word about our introduction, and then I think I'll stop. I don't know if you want to have a break, but maybe there's also some question or comment. But first, just a word about the introduction we did to this book.
咁我哋再繼續咧去到講一講呢一本書嘅一個嘅即係最開頭嘅叫做序 introduction 序言。
What's the word for introduction? 序。
序 in 普通話，序 in Cantonese 序。
What we did in the introduction, we it was fun to write the introduction. We took this story from Canto 8 of the churning of the milk ocean.
我覺得寫呢個序咧係好有意思嘅，咁我就去到攞咗第8篇呢一個攪拌牛奶之羊個內容。
And we tell that story in brief, and we interrupt from time to time to highlight different themes which one can find in the whole Bhagavatam, or different parts of the Bhagavatam.
咁所以我哋好簡要咁樣咧去到描述呢一個嘅故事啦，然之後咧喺某一啲嘅部分咧就去到特別去到強調一啲嘅主題 ，OK 喺其他博伽雅談嘅篇章裏面去到揾到嘅。
So, for example, a major theme is the preservation of what is called Dharma.
咁其中一個好主要嘅主題咧，就係點樣去到維護他嘛。
And the story of the churning kind of is rooted in the problem of preserving Dharma.
咁因為呢一個攪拌牛奶之羊，佢最根本嗰個嘅原因咧，就係為咗去到捍衛、去到保護呢一個嘅 Dharma。
And this is where there's this endless competition between the gods and the anti-gods, the asuras.
咁所以呢一個惡魔同埋半神人之間咧，有呢一個無窮無盡嘅鬥爭。
And in this pastime, it's very special because the Lord directs them to cooperate for a change. Instead of fighting, let's you two cooperate and do something good for everyone.
咁所以呢一個嘅逍遙時光故事咧，佢特別嘅地方咧就係令到半神人同埋惡魔之間嗰種紛爭咧，轉化為一種嘅合作。OK， 大家透過呢個合作都能夠得到一啲益處。
合作。
Yeah, cooperation.
Cooperation.
合作。
合作。So, and he explains that because he's Vishnu Narayan is speaking to the devas, to the demigods, and he's explaining to them, you know, now is not the time for you to prevail.
咁 Vishnu Narayana 就同呢一啲嘅神明啦、半神人講話咧，而家咧唔係你嘅唔係你即係佢叫咩？即係佢個時勢唔喺你嗰度啊，係啊，咁所以而家你就唔可以逞強，冇。
So this brings in the theme of time. Time is a major theme in the Bhagavatam.
咁所以去到帶出咧博伽雅談其中一個好重要嘅主題咧就係時間。
So in the book we have a whole article about time in the Bhagavatam.
咁喺本書裏面咧其中一篇咧就係裏面講到就係時間喺博伽雅談裏面嘅時間。
And how all the different ways of times being represented in the Bhagavatam are meant to lead us who are hearing the Bhagavatam, meant to lead us beyond time.
咁所以當我哋聆聽喺博伽雅談裏面對時間嘅唔同嘅描述呈現嘅時候咧，其實帶領我哋點樣去超越呢一個嘅時間。
So like that, the introduction gives us touches on all the different themes of the Bhagavatam in compact way by taking this one like a lens, the churning of the ocean, and seeing all the different themes within that
introduction,
within that story.
咁所以就係透過呢一個嘅故事啦，攪拌牛奶之羊咧，就好似一個嘅鏡片啦，然之後咧由嗰度咧去到放大，去睇到博伽雅談裏面唔同嘅主題。
Hare Krishna. So that was an introduction to the introduction to the overview of the Bhagavatam, for which we have, I think, not much time left.
咁呢以上呢，就係我哋對聖典博家雅談呢一個概覽嘅一個嘅簡述。
Should we see, is there any comment or question we can discuss?
有冇問題嘅？
Yes, Lakshmanji.
即係如果我哋喺書展嗰度咧，咁如果有人問我哋咧，即係你哋嘅書最重要嘅經典，咁樣我哋就國家歌啦，咁國家雅談啊咁樣樣，咁我哋又點樣即係咁大嘅本書，咁佢要我哋介紹國家雅談，你可唔可以講下咁我哋應該點樣最短述咁樣介紹俾佢咧？
So Lakshmi Prabhu raised a question like for example in the book fair, someone see like the whole like set of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So how are we going to explain to them if they ask what is it about in a few like sentences, in a brief way?
Yeah, that's interesting question. I have to confess I'm not experienced at that particular situation myself.
咁我要去到承認啊，我喺呢一種嘅情況之下，我唔係最專業嘅去到回應。
My answer would be, read this book. This will tell you what is this book.
咁我就講咧，睇咗呢本書，你就知道呢一套嘅博家雅談講咩啦。
But actually, it's something to think about. Is maybe producing a very short leaflet which introduces what is this big and very carefully thought out text.
或者可以準備一啲嘅單張，但係就要即係諗下咯，點樣去到呈現出嚟啊？用一個即係外界可以接受到嘅方式去到解釋呢一部經典。
You could have, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 key quotes from, from scholars or whoever would be good to quote praising the Bhagavatam.
或者裡面可以加啲學者啦，對於聖典博家雅談嘅評價。
You could quote our blurb on the back of this book.
咁我哋呢本書後面都有一啲嘅引用嘅。
Which says, a vibrant example of living literature.
咁係一個即係有活力嘅 ，OK， 仲係活生生嘅一個嘅文獻嘅一個嘅例子啊！聖典博家雅談 ，OK， 佢仲係有嗰種活力、生命力。
The Bhagavata Purana is a versatile Hindu sacred text written in Sanskrit verse.
咁博家雅談咧係好多變化嘅一個嘅文獻啦，係印度嘅文獻裏面係好多嘅變化，千變萬化嘅裏面，咁咧就係用梵文所去寫成嘅。
This work inspired several major North Indian devotional bhakti traditions.
咁呢一個嘅經典咧係去到啟發喺南印度某一啲嘅北印度一啲嘅groups
inspired traditions.
tradition 有唔同嘅傳統係啦，奉愛傳統。
As well as schools of dance and drama.
Schools of
dance and drama.
唔同派系嘅呢一啲嘅戲劇啦，同埋舞蹈。
And continues to permeate popular Hindu art and ritual in both India and the diaspora.
咁咧喺印度啦，同埋喺即係diaspora 移居咗嘅印度嘅群眾，咁咧係滲透咧喺佢哋嘅文化啦、佢哋嘅藝術裏面嘅，同埋儀式裏面嘅。
That may not be so attractive for people in Hong Kong.
可能香港人聽完之後唔係好有吸引力喎。
You have to think of what would be most attractive for them. But maybe making such a simple leaflet brochure would be good.
咁係咯，要用香港人覺得吸引嘅方式去到演繹咯，咁做一個單張咁。
Yeah. Yeah, yoga.
瑜伽。
This is the real yoga book.
呢個係一個真正嘅瑜伽嘅書籍。
Yeah. Yes. Do some brainstorming. You could also, I'm just brainstorming myself now, you could take the story of the churning of the ocean of milk.
或者我又諗到另外一個諗法就係用呢一個攪拌牛奶之羊嘅故事。
And see how you could take that as a theme and say this book is churning the nectar of all spiritual traditions, something like that.
咁呢本書咧係去到攪動咧所有呢一啲嘅靈性嘅傳統啊 ，OK， 攪動。
Yeah. This book opens your heart ears.
呢本書咧打開你嘅心耳。
The ears of your heart.
你心嘅耳朵。
Like that, you can find many different phrases, catching phrases, and then see how to put them together in a nice way.
可以係咯，睇下裏面有一啲嘅唔同嘅係咯啲句子咁樣，然之後將佢表達出嚟。
And you can also make it in the form of bullet points. Read this book and you will X, Y, Z. You'll get this, 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 and this.
或者可能列點式嘅，我哋睇完呢本書你就會得到嘟嘟嘟嘟咁樣。
Because everybody wants results.
因為大家都係好想知道究竟睇完之後會得到啲乜嘢，結果係乜嘢。
What's in it for me?
對於我嚟講有啲咩用處呢？
What's in it for you is finding out how you are not the center of the universe.
對於你嚟講，最大嘅益處就係你揾到原來你唔係呢個宇宙嘅中心。
How you are not the enjoyer.
你唔係真正嘅享受者。
No, don't tell them that.
唔好咁樣同佢哋講。
They will run away.
你走晒。
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Anything else? Okay. What is our schedule? We're going until 4 o'clock. Is that the idea? Okay. Another option would be that we stand up for 2 minutes. We stretch, and we do kirtan for 15 minutes. Then we can speak something more like that. We can mix and match.
咁我哋可能2分鐘嘅時間，大家可以起身喐動下個身體，伸展一下。咁我哋翻嚟咧就我哋唱一陣唱頌 ，OK？ 大概15分鐘之後就我哋可以講下嘢，咁又唱頌咁樣。
I don't know. What is this? Yours? Very good. How are you?
OK 啊，係如果有需要你叫我。聽日教你。聽日我就10
You were on Harinam just now? I saw you on the list. Book distributors.
就可以視乎我就可能就要我哋本身有一組係同時嚟上4點就真嘅。What time is every Saturday 4 to 7？我睇我今日瞓到10點，有時玩咗好多嘢。係想可以揾一啲錢包啊，其他其他。Target is want to earn some money from the book distribution to charity。因為我冇咁嘅知識去即係將呢個知識交俾人嘅，咁啊交俾人啦。She has not the knowledge to share the knowledge, so this duty is because the three of us are members. So the main one to share the knowledge is Ashman.
Yes.
Just do the backup. Yes.
He's the expert.
Yeah, 佢係專業咯。How is your body situation?
Yes, by Krishna's grace.
Everything okay?
Everything okay. Yes. Time is passing, we're getting older. Fix, Jay!
No knock.
Huh?
No knock. The door is not locked.
Not locked, no. We're all getting older.
You're not getting young.
Not getting younger. But hopefully getting wiser.
變得聰明。我近來有啲問題，如果有機會現在啲成字數算啦，叫你啲心mentally problem，即係心理上not crazy 嘅，but sad。Monday we go to her house.
Oh, yes, okay.
In Chunwan.
Xinwan is which way? East, north, west.
唔知啊 ，Lakshman 咪話荃灣屬於東南西北啊？喺邊邊啊？西邊啊？西邊 West。
West, okay.
From here around Chunwan line metro is the last stop.
Oh, okay.
We will go by this.
We can take the metro, I don't mind.
但係地鐵之後都要轉到的士，因為巴士4個字。
Metro is not to the house. From Chunwan station.
Yeah. I don't know, we can see. Maybe we can put the harmonium here again.
藍絲門 ，Venue 嗰炮，幫我搬個琴上嚟啊！搬個琴上嚟，唱歌。唔該嘢，我實在搬唔到。
I would like to introduce you to Kate.
Kate.
Yeah, so she's from Macau.
Oh.
Yeah, but lived in Hong Kong for 16 years living in Hong Kong.
Ah.
So we came across each other through the Kirtan Hong Kong program. And now she set up a Kirtan Macau in Macau.
Oh. Wow. You're a pionear.
Yeah, really amazing work she's doing.
Very good. Very good.
And amazing, she's going to Bangladesh to join and enroll in a Kirtan course.
Very good.
July.
Wow. Very nice. Very nice.
Fire.
So you are a singer.
To
Yeah.
some notes in my tongue.
Yeah. That's good. Nice. Yes, Radhadesh. That's one of the more, let's say, successful courses they have at Radhadesh. It's a nice course.
Immersion program.
You'll go this summer? Okay, good. Have you been to Europe before?
I've been not been to Belgium.
Right. Where did you go?
I was on the east side. It was more like a family trip.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, on Austria,
Vienna. You went to Vienna?
Italy, Bologna.
Oh, okay.
The first time I met you was from YouTube until I realized that you were really because I sent them some kirtan tools and I also share Guru Maharaj kirtan so they listen.
Nice. Well, all the best for you, Kate, and your spiritual journey.
Just started chapter 1, first one, starting point.
Okay. Let's make music. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Harinama, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nastyeva, 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 Gatiram Yataha. Harinama, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nastyeva, 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 Gatiram Shall we continue our discussion?
我哋繼續我哋嘅討論啊。
Okay. You wanted to continue recording. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I mentioned Srila Jiva Goswami before.
喺之前咧，我提過Srila Jiva Goswami 呢一位人物，呢一位聖人。
He is one of what we call the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan.
咁咧佢係6位喺 Vrindavan 嘅 Goswami 裏面嘅其中一位。
He was the nephew of Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami.
咁佢係Rupa Goswami 同埋 Sanatana Goswami 嘅侄。
And like his uncles, he was very learned.
就同佢嘅叔叔一樣啦，佢係非常之有學識嘅。
And his learning included some time in Varanasi. Varanasi is famous as the hub of Sanskrit learning in North India.
咁佢嘅學習咧亦都包括係喺Varanasi 呢一個地方，可以稱為呢一個嘅學習嘅一個嘅好似一個熔爐啊，OK 一個聚集嘅點。咁咧尤其是係學習呢一個嘅梵文。
And then later he joined his uncles in Vrindavan.
之後咧，佢就喺 Vrindavan 咧同佢嘅叔叔啦去到會面。
And there he wrote, I spoke of the first part of a 6-part series. He wrote together, it's called the Bhagavat Sandarbha.
咁就係有6個系列嘅，佢就寫咗第一個系列咧，就係呢一個頭先我哋講嘅叫做Bhagavatam Sandarbha。Bhagavata Sandarbha。
And I mentioned the first part, the Tattva Sandarbha.
咁第一個部分咧，頭先我講過咧，就係 Tattva 嘅 Sandarbha。
The whole work is about the Bhagavatam.
整個嘅呢一個嘅文獻啦，都係咧關於博伽雅談。
And it's a kind of systematization of the Bhagavatam, the theology of the Bhagavatam, the philosophy.
將聖典博伽雅談佢嘅神學啦，佢呢一個嘅theology and philosophy 哲學啦，就將佢係有系統化嘅。
Heavy words. I mention this because the Bhagavatam is full of theology and philosophy. I mentioned before narrative, but the woven into the narrative is so much theology and philosophy.
咁所以博伽雅談，頭先我哋講過係好多嘅故事啦，去到即係串聯啦。但係呢啲故事裏面咧，亦都咧包含住哲學同埋神學。
And so it's woven in the Bhagavatam. It's woven through the narrative. So it's not so systematic.
咁所以喺呢一個嘅博伽雅談啦，或者喺呢啲故事裏面咧，係互相去到交織嘅，就唔係咁有系統。
Someone with an analytical mind may not be happy with the Bhagavatam as it is.
咁所以如果一個人佢係好理性分析型嘅話咧，咁佢對於博伽雅談咧，佢就覺得唔係咁高興啊，即係冇系統啊，覺得。
So Jiva Goswami takes the Bhagavatam and he reorganizes, so to say. He extracts verses and he makes it all very systematic.
咁所以 Jiva Goswami 咧就將呢一個博伽雅談咧去到重組，然之後咧抽取裡面嘅一啲嘅詩節啦，然之後再將佢有系統咁樣去到即係去到再編排。
And at the same time, he's also summarizing because he's not giving us all the verses of the Bhagavatam. He's giving selected verses.
咁佢係挑選某一啲嘅詩節啦，所以咧佢呈現出嚟咧又係一個博伽雅談嘅一個嘅簡要係啦概要。
And he makes one major point. Must be in the second part, which is also called Bhagavat Sandarbha, and that is that the entire Bhagavatam is a expansion on one verse.
咁喺呢一個嘅呢一個嘅篇幅裏面咧嘅第2部分啊，咁咧就係用一個嘅詩節咧去概括整個嘅博伽雅談。
Not even one verse, but one line of one verse.
甚至唔係一個詩節，係一個詩節裏面嘅其中一句。
And the one line, I think most of you know, it is Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam.
咁大家都聽過呢一句説話就係 Krishna-du Swayam Bhagavan。Krishna 係
Krishnastu
Bhagavan Swayam。
Ete Changsa Kalapungsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakalam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. It's saying that the Lord appears in yuga after yuga in order to support, to defend Indra against his enemies, he appears in his original form as Krishna.
呢個詩詞裏面講呢，Krishna 一個年代又復一個年代啦，去到顯現啦、降凡啦，就係咧去到保護佢嘅呢一位嘅奉獻者 Indra， 咁咧就抵抗佢嘅呢一啲嘅敵人，咁佢亦都以佢咧最原本嘅形象咧 Krishna 去到顯現。
The whole Bhagavatam is elaborating on that simple statement.
咁所以用呢一句嘅説話咧，就去解釋呢一個整部嘅《薄伽亞談》。
But it's not so simple.
但又唔係真係咁簡單一句説話喎。
Or put another way, to get to that point of understanding how Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there's another verse he quotes from 1st Canto, 2nd chapter.
咁如果要去明白呢一句嘅説話 ，Krishna 係至尊人格守神嘅話咧，咁就可以引用喺雅談嘅第一篇嘅第2章裡面嘅一個詩節。
Vedanti tattva vedas tattvam yat jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. He says that the absolute reality, truth, is one.
咁話咧呢個絕對嘅實相啊 ，OK 真相咧只係一。
It is
one.
It's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 25, it's not 10 million, it's 1.
唔係2個、3個或者10萬個，係一個。
But this one can be understood in 3 different ways.
咁但係呢一個嘅一咧，可以咧由3個方面咧去到認識佢。
Can be referred to in 3 different ways, namely Brahman, Paramatman, and Bhagavan.
咁咧就係呢一個嘅 Brahman 梵啦、超靈啦 Paramatma 同埋薄伽梵 Bhagavan。
And Jiva Goswami dedicates an entire more than 1/6, I would say, a major part of his book to explain Paramatma, this aspect of this one absolute.
咁佢就花咗1/6嘅篇幅咧，就去到解釋呢一個嘅超力嘅嗰個嘅層面。
Which is interesting for us because Paramatma is the Lord who is with us as we speak and as we sit here and listen. He is the Lord in our heart.
咁呢個係好重要嘅喎，因為呢一位嘅主啦、超靈啦嘅展示啦，其實係當我哋講説話，當我哋坐喺度嘅時候，佢都同我哋一齊，佢就喺我哋嘅心裏面。
Whether we know of him at all or not, he's there.
無論我哋知又好，唔知又好，佢喺我哋嘅心中。
And he's there in the hearts of every living being.
佢處於所有生物體嘅心中。
Including those people who give us trouble.
包括嗰啲為我哋帶嚟麻煩嘅人。
Yes. So, what is this Paramatma? It's all in the Bhagavatam, and Jiva Goswami gives us systematically how this is explained.
咁所以Jiva Goswami 咧就好有系統咁樣解釋俾我哋睇，究竟乜嘢係超力。
What about Brahman? Jiva Goswami does not bother with Brahman.
咁對於梵嘅描述咧 ，Jiva Goswami 咧佢唔係太有興趣，係唔太關心。
There's not much to say about Brahman.
對於 Brahman 冇乜嘢好講嘅。
Brahman is this completely impersonal reality, which it's just not interesting for the devotees, and it's in any case the lowest of the 3 conceptions.
咁呢個梵咧係一個非人格嘅即係實相嘅展示啦。咁對於奉獻者嚟講咧，並唔係太有趣，而且咧佢喺3個嘅即係3個嘅層面裏面咧面向裏面咧係屬於最低嘅。
So most of his sandarbhas are about Krishna, Bhagavan, the supreme, what Prabhupada called this in English, the supreme personality of Godhead.
所以佢所寫嘅呢個神打巴類嘅書裏面咧，大部分咧都係去到講解Krishna 啦，或者食包包稱為咧至尊人格守神。
I'm afraid to ask, how do you say in Guangdonghua, the supreme personality of
我唔
Godhead?
敢問點樣廣東話點樣講至尊人格守神。
Right.
啱。
Sounds good.
幾好聽，聽落去。
Yeah. Okay, so when we think about what is the Bhagavatam, it's important to be aware. It is very much about understanding, about comprehending who is this supreme personality.
咁所以當我哋去到讀博伽雅談咧，其中一個好重要，我哋要去到理解咧，就係究竟乜嘢係至尊人格咧？
And Jiva Goswami explains already in the Tattva Sandarbha, the beginning of our understanding of the Supreme Person is understanding something about ourselves.
咁 Jiva Goswami 喺Tattva Sandarbha 呢度裏面咧講到一開始嘅時候咧講到，當我哋去到認識呢一個嘅至尊人格嘅時候咧，其實就係去到認識我哋自己。
There's many things about ourselves which are also true of the Lord, or we can say the other way around. Because they're true of the Lord, they're also true of us.
咁因為我哋去到擁有嘅呢一啲嘢嘅真正嘅真實嘅，咁咧其實至尊人格咧，佢亦都擁有，或者調翻轉嚟講，佢擁有嘅，其實我哋都會擁有。
And there's a lot which is true about the Supreme Lord, which is not true about us, or put the other way around, there's some things about us which are very, very limited about in relation to the Lord.
咁或者關於我哋嘅嘢，有啲係並又唔可以適用於喺至尊人格嗰度喎 ，OK， 或者至尊人格嘅佢擁有嘅又未必適用於喺我哋嘅身上，而且我哋所擁有嘅關於我哋嘅其實係好有限。
One of the major themes of the Bhagavatam, because the sort of core question is, who are we, and who is that supreme person? The question comes also, where are we?
咁所以雅談裏面有個好重要嘅問題，就究竟我哋係邊個呢？至尊人又係邊個呢？喺邊度呢？邊度 ？Where？
邊度？到啦。邊度
？Where？
Very, very interesting language. So, where are we? We can say, okay, I'm in Hong Kong, I'm on such and such street, 6th floor, yeah.
所以我哋究竟而家喺邊度呢？我哋可以話我哋而家喺香港喺呢一個大廈裏面嘅6樓。
But where are we in a deeper sense? That's what the Bhagavatam is giving. So that is, we can say, the subject of cosmology.
咁如果我哋用博伽雅談裏面去到解釋究竟我哋喺邊度呢，就係一個更加深入嘅一個解釋啦。我哋就會牽涉到呢一個宇宙觀。
And the cosmology of the Bhagavatam is very fascinating because it seems to be describing a very different kind of world from the one we're familiar with.
喺博伽雅談裏面所描述嘅世界咧係非常之精彩嘅，同我哋一般去認識嘅世界咧係好唔同。
And it becomes a cause, it's quite a challenge for us as we hear about, we hear about Bhumandala, we hear about mountains that go miles and miles and tens and hundreds of thousands of miles and so on. It's all very strange.
咁我哋聽到喺《博伽雅談》裏面描述嘅世界，譬如呢一個嘅 Blue Mandala，OK 佢所描述嘅呢個地球嘅呢一個嘅星系嘅層面啦，跟住之後咧講到有一座山啦，係10萬或者8萬英里咁高嘅一座山。
It sounds even more far out in 廣東話。
好似廣東話聽起嚟仲即係冇辦法想像。
So one of the articles here explains one way of understanding this very strange description, especially in the 5th canto, but also in 2nd and 3rd cantos.
咁喺呢一本書裏面咧，其中一個嘅章節咧就係描述呢一個嘅宇宙觀啦。咁裏面咧包含雅談嘅雅談，主要係第5篇啦，亦都有第2同埋第3篇嘅。
That it's describing a form of meditation.
咁其實呢一個嘅描述咧係一種嘅冥想嚟㗎。
Meditation is sometimes involving visualization.
咁當我哋冥想嘅有時候咧，有陣時咧亦都會有一種嘅意象啊會出現。
Because one of the things we want to do in cultivating bhakti is to restructure our sense activity to be tuned in to spirit.
咁當我哋去到培養奉愛嘅時候咧，其實我哋就係去到重新重組我哋呢啲感官嘅活動啦，而將咧佢咧同呢一個嘅奉愛咧係去到連接啊，進入。
So one way of understanding is through the sort of classical yoga system of meditation.
咁其中一個方法就係啲傳統嘅瑜伽嘅冥想嘅方法。
And that can be then applied to a process of revisualizing the universe.
咁嗰個其中一個嗰個方式咧，就係可以去到重組呢一個嘅意象景象。
In which one locates different forms of the Lord in different locations.
然之後咧就將至尊主啦，佢嘅唔同嘅形象咧，就放喺唔同嘅地方啊位置嗰度。
And then one can listen to each of those forms of the Lord, how they are worshipped.
然之後聆聽呢一啲唔同主嘅唔同嘅形象咧，係點樣咧受到崇拜。
One example is the worship of Narasingha by Prahlad. In one of these islands, is it Kimpurusha Varsha? I don't remember now. One of these Varshas.
其中一個冥想咧就係Prahlad Maharaj 咧去到崇拜主尼閃下喺其中一個嘅 Varsha 地區嗰度。
Varsha is what is a Varsha? That is a good question.
咩係 Varsha? Big question.
Yeah. Anyway, we won't go into the details here because I'm not so expert in that.
咁我哋唔去到深究個細節。
But here is a nice example of how we can see how the Bhagavatam weaves together all these different themes and aspects.
咁所以我哋可以睇到喺《博伽雅談》裏面咧，點樣唔同嘅主題咧喺度互相交織。
Because we understand now we can meditate on the cosmos as a form of meditation. So, all right, that's a kind of practice. So that's getting into what to do. I want to practice bhakti yoga. What should I do?
咁如果我哋將呢一個嘅冥想呢一個宇宙啦，作為至尊者嘅形象啦，作為一種嘅冥想啦，但我哋問啦，咁我點樣可以喺我嘅奉愛嘅練習裏面可以實踐到出嚟呢？
And then, all right, here's some details that you can focus your attention on. Instead of focusing on all the mundane things that distract us. Here, put your mind on Bhumandala, put your mind on the different varshas, on the dvipas, and on the residents and especially the divinities of those places.
咁咧你可以將你嘅心念啊轉移啊，由一啲好物質啊俗世嘅事情咧，去到冥想住，譬如 Bhumandala， 然之後咧冥想住呢一啲嘅唔同嘅地區啦，或者嘅島啦，跟住冥想住喺裏面至尊主啦嘅即係呢啲嘅神聖啦嘅展現啦，身份或者形象。
For example, on how Prahlad, who's described much more elaborately in the 7th canto, here in the 5th canto, he offers prayers to Nrsingadev.
咁喺第7篇咧會更加詳細去到描述嘅就係Prahlad 啦點樣向主Nrsimhadev咧去獻上禱文。
And his famous prayer, some of you may know, is a prayer to please dispel all the nasty things from the heart.
咁其中一個禱文咧，大家可能都會熟悉嘅，好出名嘅就係咧，請你將我哋內心一啲唔乾淨、骯髒嘅嘢咧，去到清除。
清除。Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Tejase Avirabhir Bhava Vajranaka Vajradangstra Karmashayan Randhaya Tamo Grasa Om Swaha Abhayam Atmani Bhuishta Om Shram. Translate?
Speechless.
Oh, ready. That was quick.
Nice. 呢個係第5篇第18章第8個詩字。5, 18, 8.
Yes, you can translate.
Okay. 咁咧，我向主Nrsimhadev咧致以呢一個嘅虔敬嘅頂拜，佢係咧所有一切嘅力量嘅源頭。我嘅主啊，佢擁有住呢一個嘅指甲同埋呢一個嘅牙齒啊，就好似咧呢一啲嘅閃電請求你仁慈地咧去到將我哋好似惡魔般嘅呢一啲嘅慾望希望去到從事呢一啲嘅果報性嘅活動喺物質世界裏面呢一啲嘅惡魔性嘅慾望咧，去到剷除。聖你咧顯現喺我哋嘅內心裏面，將我哋嘅愚昧咧去到清除。透過你嘅仁慈咧，我哋喺呢一個物質世界裏面嘅存在啦，有掙扎啦，但係咧都能夠無懼。
Bravo. So, what I wanted to suggest by pointing to this particular verse is one way to appreciate the Bhagavatam is it's like a hall of mirrors. It's like this temple room.
咁點解我提起呢一個嘅詩節咧？其實《白灣雅談》就好似喺一間房裏面咧，全部都係鏡嚟嘅喎，就好似我哋呢個廟堂。
So this verse can take us to the 7th canto, and the 7th canto description of Prahlad and appearance of Nrsinga, that can take us back to the 3rd canto where we hear about how Jaya and Vijaya have been cursed and why they've been cursed.
咁我嘅意思就點解好似啲鏡咧，好似反射咁樣啦。咁我哋由頭先第5篇啦，聽到呢一個嘅詩節啦，跟住就會帶我哋去到第7篇，就係詳細去到描述Nrsimhadev同埋Prahlad之間嘅逍遙時光啦。跟住由嗰度咧，我哋又會咧穿越咧去翻呢一個嘅第3篇裏面咧，解釋Vijaya 同埋Jaya 嘅故事。
And that could take us up to Canto 10, I'm not sure, chapter 70 something, where is described how Shishupal, who is one of those forms of Jai or Vijay, who was cursed, is insulting Krishna with one insult after another.
跟住又可以由第3篇嗰度又帶領我哋穿越去到呢一個第10篇，我唔記得係咪第7章。咁咧裡面就講到 Shishupal 咧係佢一次又一次咁樣去到羞辱Krishna。
And what happens to Shishupal when he's done with his 100th insult?
咁咧佢第100次嘅羞辱咧，咁佢就一命嗚呼啦。
Everyone goes like this. Yes, with Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra, he makes a very clean cut to Shishupal in such a way, two things. One is that no blood went into the sacrificial arena to spoil that would have spoiled everything. They would have had to start over. So he made it so that wouldn't happen.
咁所以當佢第100次羞辱 Krishna 嘅時候咧 ，Krishna 就用佢嘅神碟啦，就好乾淨利落，OK 一滴血都冇，即係沾染嘅。咁咧就將Shishupal 咧就即係斬除啦。咁咧亦都冇去到令到嗰個祭壇嗰度咧有任何嘅沾污。
And the other, of course, wonderful thing is everyone witnesses as Shishupal's Atma, his self, enters into the body of Krishna.
跟住在場嘅所有人咧，去到目擊到咧 Shishupal 咧嘅 Atma， 佢嘅靈魂咧係進入 Krishna 裏面。
And when Yudhishthira sees this, he goes, "Oh no! What is this about?"
咁當 Yudhishthira 睇到呢個情景嘅時候，佢就點解會發生咁嘅事㗎？
Such a demon, and he gets to enter into Krishna. It's not fair.
呢個惡魔居然可以進入喺 Krishna 嘅體內喎，唔公平啊！
And so that leads to the whole discussion of Canto 7, which, well, it begins with Maharaj Parikshit's question, leads to Narada explaining to Yudhishthira why all of this has happened with Shishupal, and he takes it all the way back to Canto 3 and then takes it forward to the appearance of Nrsingadev.
跟住之後就翻去第7篇裏面去到解釋呢一個嘅Parikshit Maharshi 問嘅問題，跟住再由Narada Muni 再去到解釋，跟住又再翻去第3篇，跟住第3篇，sorry gosh.
It's getting lost. Yeah.
Okay, 7 and then 3 and then back to
maybe back to 7.
又翻去第7篇。
In the, I think it's in the first chapter. Yeah, first chapter, Canto 7. There's a verse in which Shukadeva Goswami explains something very, very essential principle of bhakti.
咁喺第7篇嘅第1章裏面咧 ，Sukadeva Goswami 咧去到解釋咗咧Bhakti 裏面咧非常之重要嘅原則。
And that is, I keep intending to memorize this verse, and then I never do. But the verse basically says, by any number of different emotions, it is possible to engage in Krishna Bhakti.
咁咧呢一個嘅詩詞，我嘗試去記住，但我暫時都記唔到。個意思咧就係話咧唔同嘅種類嘅係咪 ？Any number。Any kinds， 任何種類嘅嘅情感啊，都可以用喺 Krishna 嘅服務當中。
Even hatred, even fear can bring one to the Lord.
就算係恐懼或者係憤怒，都可以用喺服務裏面。
And then now we jump back to the 10th canto in what many consider to be the high point of the entire Bhagavatam, namely the Rasa Lila.
咁我哋跳一跳咧，去到呢一個嘅第10篇裏面，去到描述Rasa Lila 被視為咧係整個薄伽雅壇嘅高潮頂峰。IMAX
Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Krishna Jai Vande Shri Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Gadodaye Pushpavanto Chitro Shando Tanmo Nudo. So in the beginning of that discussion, the Rasa Lila, Maharaj Parikshit voices a doubt.
咁喺呢一個Rasa Lila 嘅討論咧開始嘅時候咧，Parikshit Maharaj 咧就有一個疑問。
He's speaking to Shukadev Goswami.
咁佢就向Shukadev Goswami 提出呢一個疑問。
He says, "How is it possible? How is it possible that these girls who they just have lust for Krishna, that they're attaining liberation?"
咁佢就問啦，點可能咧？冇可能嘅，冇可能嘅。呢一啲嘅女仔咧對 Krishna 咧係 lust 色欲，咁咧但係佢哋咧居然咧能夠獲得解脫喎。
And Shukadev Goswami, in a rare moment of expressing a little bit of impatience, he says, "I have already explained this to you."
咁Shukadev Goswami咧，佢就露出少少嘅一絲嘅唔耐煩，佢就話啦：其實我已經同你解釋過啦。
And he basically quotes himself from the beginning of the 7th canto.
咁佢就引述翻自己之前喺第7篇裏面所講嘅説話。
To say there are so many different ways that one can approach the Lord.
咁咧有好多唔同嘅方式咧，一個人可以去到接近主。
This is a major theme of the Bhagavatam.
呢個咧係薄伽雅壇嘅重要核心嘅主題。
And this points to a broader topic of the Bhagavatam, we can say, and that is ethics.
咁呢度咧就會去到牽涉到咧薄伽雅壇另外一個更加大嘅主題就係道德倫理。
So one of the articles in this book is about ethics in the Bhagavatam.
咁所以喺呢本書其中一篇咧就係講到喺薄伽雅壇裏面嘅倫理觀。
Ethics, what is ethics? Well, you can say it's about right and wrong. It's about how to know what is right, what is wrong, what is good.
咁我哋講倫理嘅時候，你可以將佢諗為乜嘢係啱啦，乜嘢係錯啦，係咪是非啦，或者點樣知道乜嘢係啱，乜嘢係錯。
But the Bhagavatam has a very, very special understanding of ethics based on the principle of bhakti.
但係薄伽雅壇咧，佢對於倫理咧有一個好獨特嘅見解，咁咧就係以呢一個奉愛咧為一個嘅基調。
And so Gopal, what's his name? Gopal. Anyway, devotee who wrote this article, he called his article, he quotes, "May calamities befall us at every step."
咁咧佢喺呢一個文章，因為奉獻者寫嘅呢一章裏面咧，佢開始嘅時候咧話願所有嘅災難咧臨喺我哋嘅每一步。
What kind of a prayer is that?
係咩嘅禱文嚟㗎？
Who prays to God, "My dear Lord, please bring more trouble"?
邊個會同主去到祈禱？請你俾多啲嘅問題麻煩俾我。
What kind of a religion is this?
佢話係咩宗教嚟㗎呢個？
Some sort of masochistic religion.
咩被虐自虐狂，被虐狂，被虐嚇。
Yeah. No, it's not about that.
其實唔係咁嘅意
It's
思。
about how to see the Lord, how to be in the presence of the Lord.
咁咧其實係點樣去到能夠見到主？
The subtitle of this article is The Bhagavata's Response to the Problem of Evil.
咁呢一篇嘅主題咧就係波加雅談對於呢一個世界嘅惡啊或者邪惡嘅一個嘅回應。
So this is a famous, very famous theological problem, or for the non-theist, it is a challenge to the theist.
咁所以對於無神論者嚟講咧，佢哋會用呢一點咧去到挑戰嗰啲有神論者。
As a challenge, a person will say, how can we believe that an all-good God exists, seeing as we do that there is so much evil in the world?
咁佢就會有一個佢有一個嘅即係爭辯咧，就係話點樣你點可以講話呢個神係好嘅善嘅？但係當我哋見到呢個世界有咁多嘅罪惡存在。
And there have been volumes and volumes and volumes and whole libraries written by theologians trying to defend God exists, and yes, there's evil, or no, there's not really evil, or all kinds of explanations are there. So much is written on this subject.
咁所以有好多嘅神學家咧，都寫咗好多嘅書，去到嘗試即係去到抗辯啊。其實神係存在嘅，嗰啲嘅罪惡其實唔係真係罪惡嚟嘅，或者唔係真係邪惡嘅。
So, I won't give you the answer from the Bhagavatam. That would spoil it.
咁咧，我唔話俾大家聽，波加雅談嘅回應係乜嘢。
You have to read all 12 cantos.
咁咧，我哋要自己睇晒12篇。
Or you can also read this article.
或者你可以睇呢一篇嘅文章。
Yeah. I think with very limited time left, now I'm going to jump to the second part, which is the Bhagavata in the world.
咁我哋時間有限啊，我就跳到咧去到呢一本書嘅第二個部分，就係喺呢一個世界裏面嘅波加雅談。
As a transition between the world of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavatam in the world is a very nice article by a good friend of mine, devotee in Finland. It's called Heresy and Heretics in the Bhagavatam. Heresy and Heretics.
Okay.
What's a heretic? Heretic? Uh-oh.
咁有一篇文章咧，就喺呢兩個部分裏面一個嘅過渡啊。OK， 即係由波加梵歌的波加雅談的世界過渡到世界中的波加雅談。就有一位芬蘭嘅我嘅好朋友，一位嘅學者咧所去到寫嘅 heretics。
A heretic is a deviant.
異端異端 deviant
Someone who's deviant. Yeah.
偏離邪教。
We got it now. Okay.
OK。
Yes. Good. So, anyway, this chapter is describing what in the Bhagavatam is described as outsiders.
異端異端異端 OK we have some
No, I said it's not cult. The Chinese 邪教 is another meaning.
Oh. Okay. Anyway,
Yes.
So another way of saying in common English would be outsiders or the bad guys.
OK， 即係佢意思就係話一啲嘅門外漢啊 ，OK， 或者一啲 壞人點樣去到點樣去到佢哋點樣去到演繹波加雅談 Could you explain more?
I will.
Yeah, please. Really not sufficient. Yeah.
So there's a technical term in the Bhagavatam. What is pakanda?
喺波加雅談裏面有個字叫 pakanda.
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 And this takes us to a story, which is, where is it? In the 6th canto. That Prithu Maharaj is performing ritual sacrifices. He wants to do 100, and Indra gets nervous because he's getting close to 100, and if he does, he might take his place.
咁咧就我哋講到咧第6篇，咁咧 Prithu 國王咧佢就做緊一個嘅儀式祭祀，咁咧如果佢完成100次嘅話咧，佢就有機會咧取代 Indra 嘅位置，咁所以 Indra 咧就好驚啦。
So Indra disguises himself as a sannyasi.
Indra 咧就將自己假裝咧成為一個氣絕僧。
Why does he do that?
點解佢咁做咧？
So that when he steals the horse, because this is horse sacrifice, that's a whole other story. He steals the horse from Prithu Maharaj, and then so that he won't get killed by Prithu's son, because you don't go killing sannyasis. He makes himself look just a poor monk.
咁佢之所以咁樣做咧，就係因為佢要去偷嗰匹馬。咁咧，當佢偷呢匹馬嘅時候，如果佢裝扮自己成為一個氣絕僧咧，佢如果有人捉到佢，即係 Prithu 國王嘅仔捉到佢咧，佢就我只不過係一個窮僧，就唔會傷害佢咯。
So Prithu's son recovers the horse, brings it back. They start to do the sacrifice. Again, Indra comes in another disguise, another type of monk. Steals the horse, same thing, and he keeps doing this.
咁所以嗰啲Prithu 嘅國王嘅兒子攞翻嗰隻馬翻嚟，跟住 Indra 又再偽裝另外一種嘅形象，跟住又偷走個馬，如是者幾次都係咁樣。
And each time that he's disguising himself, he becomes the origin of a new group of heretics, a new group of deviants from the Vedic tradition.
所以每一次嘅假裝咧，呢啲個偽裝咧，咁咧佢就成為咗呢一個嘅偉大嘅傳統嘅一啲嘅異端嘅支派。
So anyway, this article describes some of these outsiders, including followers of Shiva. Is very much praised in the Bhagavatam, but his followers. His followers are a bit wild sometimes, so they're kind of outsiders.
咁譬如喺波加雅談裏面有對於Shiva神嘅描述啦，就係即係非常之正面嘅，但係Shiva神嘅追隨者有陣時就比較狂野啲，係啦，咁就會被視為係即係偏離咗咯。
Yeah.
So they're considered heretics?
Well, the way the Bhagavatam is presenting there, we know the story from the 4th canto. There's the conflict between Daksha and Shiva, and then there's cursing and counter-cursing.
咁我哋如果去憶記翻第4篇咧，就係講到 Shiva 神同埋Daksha 之間互相去到詛咒。
And so this is kind of controversial, but the position of the Bhagavatam is to say the Lord Shiva is practically non-different from Krishna.
咁波加雅談嘅睇法咧就係實際上 Shiva 神咧同埋Krishna 咧其實係冇分別嘅。
But his followers, they're these. He is known as Pashupati. He has followers. He's the lord of animals, but he's also the lord of the various entities, the ghosts and other such beings. So it's these kind of beings that the Bhagavatam is saying we don't want to have to do with them.
咁但係 書法神嘅追隨者呢一啲嘅鬼魂啊，係咪動物啊？就OK。咁咧就博伽雅談就即係保持距離咯，對於佢哋。
And one of the curses against Shiva is, may those who take a vow to follow Shiva and those who follow them become heretics.
咁其中一個詛咒咧就係話願嗰啲去到追隨住 Shiva 或者追隨住 Shiva 嘅追隨者嘅人會變成異端。
Yeah, there's more explanation here, but what it seems to be speaking about, as the author explains, is a particular group called the Kapalikas.
咁喺呢度作者佢講到其中一個即係一班人啦，佢哋就稱為Kapalikas.
The problem about the Kapalikas, we don't know much about them because they don't exist anymore.
咁對於呢一班人，其實我哋對佢冇太多嘅認識，都唔知道佢哋。
But they were very much oriented toward Tantra in the Tamasic aspect of Tantra, apparently.
咁佢哋就多啲係同呢一啲嘅Tantra 或者愚昧屬性嘅密宗係咪？去到即係關聯咯，對嗰方面。
Yeah. So that was one group of sort of outsiders. Another group is the Jains.
咁呢個係其中一派嘅異端啦。另外一派咧就係耆那教。
I think you have Jains here in Hong Kong.
喺香港有耆那教嘅教徒。
They emphasize ahimsa and so on. But the Bhagavatam says that's all very nice, but they're atheists.
Yeah. 咁佢哋 we had a temple, I think, just right.
Yeah.
A few rows.
No, they anyway, it's complicated.
咁好複雜嘅成件事情。咁
They
佢
worship
哋
the Tirthankaras and so on.
咁佢哋去到提倡呢一個非暴力係非常之好嘅，但係同一時間佢哋係冇神論嘅。
At the same time, the Bhagavatam is praising Rishabha as one of the avatars of the Lord, and Rishabha is considered one of the Tirthankaras in the Jain tradition. So there's kind of crossing, and the Bhagavatam says, yes, Rishabdev ki jai, followers of Jainism, boo.
咁喺雅談裏面咧有描述到咧Rishabdev 嘅，咁Rishabdev咧佢係Jain 咪叫耆那教裏面嘅其中一個嘅，好似我哋唔知有24個神定係咩嘅，其中一個嚟嘅師父係嘛？師父 ，OK， 咁所以就呢個係一個好事嚟嘅 ，OK， 即係博伽雅談呢位嘅人物喺佢哋裏面有呢一個嘅角色，但係對於即係佢哋嘅追隨者嘅話就
Yeah, that's in the Bhagavatam in 5th canto. Specifically, it condemns a certain King Arhat of Konka as being as imitating Rishabdev.
咁喺第5篇裏面描述有一啲人，咁咧就去到模仿Rishabdev。
And he says he introduces the bad path of the Pakandas.
咁係佢咧去到引領咧呢一啲嘅Pakanda 嘅呢啲即係唔偏離咗嘅一啲道路。
Yeah. So I mention all of this because this is like a kind of transition between the world of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavatam in the world.
咁點解我提呢一章呢？就係佢就係有一個過渡啊，由博伽雅談嘅世界咧過到我哋而家身處嘅呢一個世界裏面嘅博伽雅談。
It also mentions Buddhists, by the way.
都有提及佛教徒。
Also don't quite get it right.
佢哋可能都唔係好明白當故中嘅意思。
So then we have 2 chapters, I think, one about dance and one about music, because both of these have been deeply influenced by the Bhagavatam.
咁另外嘅2篇呢，就係講到喺現世裏面呢，博伽雅談所呈現嘅嗰一種嘅舞蹈同埋音樂。
Practically any time you'll see a performance of classical Indian dance, whether it's Bharatnatyam or Odissi or there's many other forms, almost all of them there will be some performance of something of Krishna Lila. Krishna or Rama, but lots of Krishna Lila.
所以如果我哋睇一啲印度嘅傳統嘅舞蹈嘅時候咧，好多時候佢哋都會加入博伽雅談，尤其是係關於描述 Krishna 嘅故事嘅元素喺裏面。
I always remember attending one performance by I was told quite famous dancer from India. The performance was when I was teaching in University of Florida. This performer was there, and when she first came up, I don't remember her name. Famous, but I don't remember. But she came on stage, and my first thought was, "Oh, but she's kind of older. How is she gonna, make nice dance?" She seemed kind of like, part of me said, "She's too old to do this." That was my first impression.
咁我當時喺佛羅里達州嗰度大學嗰度咧，就去到出席一個嘅舞蹈傳統嘅印度舞。咁我見到嗰一位嘅舞者咧出現嘅時候，一位女士，我唔記得佢個名啦，但係佢即係年紀比較大啲，所以我第一個印象就係佢年紀咁大都可以跳到舞。
But then I saw her dance. And I was amazed.
當我睇到佢跳舞嘅時候咧，我係驚訝。
Because I could see as she performed some Krishna Lila, I think it was Damodar Lila, she was so advanced. She was completely beyond the technicalities of dance. She was really so much expressing the bhava, the rasa. Very powerful.
所以當佢一跳嘅時候咧，非常之有嗰種張力啊！因為佢完全係超越嗰啲舞蹈嗰啲技術啊！佢係直情係將呢一個嘅 rasa 呢一種嘅甜美呢一種嘅bhav 嗰種嘅愛咧，係將佢完全係即係沉浸，然之後去到表達出嚟、演繹出嚟。
Usually when we see dance performance, they may be technically very nice.
有陣時我哋睇一啲舞蹈嘅表演，可能嗰個舞技係好精湛嘅。
But you might feel as you're watching that your main attention is on the technical side.
咁但係當你睇個舞蹈嘅時候，可能你嘅注意力就擺喺嗰啲即係舞步啊技術上面咯。
You may feel like, oh yes, she's doing very nice, the mudras and the face gestures and everything. Very nice.
或者佢做嘅手印啊，或者佢嘅面部嘅表情啊，做得好好。
But this particular performer, she was so good. She had all the techniques, no question, but she had so much more. She could communicate the bhava, and that was very powerful.
咁所以呢一位嘅舞者咧，佢唔單止有晒呢啲嘅技術啊，OK， 而且咧係將呢一種嘅愛啊，bhava 係能夠去到傳遞到出嚟。
There's another article here by, he's actually my godbrother. He's an ethnomusicologist by profession. He's a professor of ethnomusicology. And he's studied Indian music for decades.
咁另外一個文章咧，第10篇咧就係我嘅神兄弟所寫嘅。咁咧佢係去到研究呢一個印度嘅音樂學。
So
民族係少數民族嘅音樂學。
So here he writes about 2 very specific versions of the singing of the Rasa Lila based on the Bhagavatam, but sung in Braj-bhasha language. In the Braj-bhasha is the language of Braj.
咁喺裏面咧就有兩個嘅版本啦，歌曲咧就係描述呢一個嘅rasa 之舞。咁咧其中一個咧係用Vrindavan 佢哋嘅語言啊，當地嘅語言寫嘅。
And this is, I mention this because the Bhagavatam has generated out of the text, out of this book, the Bhagavatam, it's generated so much art.
咁我點解提呢？就因為從博伽雅談呢一部嘅經典啊，係由佢嗰度去延伸出好多唔同形式嘅藝術。
And one example is this singing of Rasalila in this essentially a poetic village language.
咁咧就係將呢一個rasa 之舞呢一個嘅逍遙時光咧，用一種詩嘅語言咧去到唱出嚟。
Which people will sit, they will listen. In present day Vrindavan, they will listen to such a performance. These are people who may be quite simple people. They are not going to read the Bhagavatam, the Sanskrit. They're not reading Sanskrit.
咁呢啲可能係一啲村落嘅村民嚟㗎，好簡單嘅，佢哋未必會去到睇博伽雅談呢一個經典，但佢哋就會坐喺度，跟住就聽呢一啲嘅歌。
And they're hearing it as music. It's not just, some text, but it's music. And it's very, very refined music which communicates through raga, the very specific moods of the Rasa Lila.
所以聽嘅時候唔係淨係聽個歌詞文字，佢聽個音樂，透過呢個音樂咧，點樣去到感受呢一個嘅 rasa 之舞嘅一個逍遙時光。
And they will do this as a performance for Krishna in the temple.
係好精細嘅，咁咧佢哋就會將呢一個嘅表現咧視為咧一種嘅奉獻，喺 Krishna 嘅廟裏面去奉獻俾 Krishna。
And this brings another kind of circle, another kind of hall of mirrors, if you like. So this brings us to the whole process of worshipping Krishna in the temple, which is, there's ritual, but there's also art.
咁所以帶我哋去到對 Krishna 嘅崇拜啦，喺廟宇裏面啦，唔單止係有儀式啦，而且咧係有呢一個嘅藝術。
And this is what you see in some of these older temples in Vrindavan today is there's some very talented and very well-trained musicians whose service it is needs a new battery whose service to the deity is to sing for them.
咁所以喺 Vrindavan 嘅一啲廟裏面咧，有一啲嘅信眾啦，佢哋嘅服務啊，就係去到唱歌，唱俾 Krishna 聽。
And you come in that temple, you sit and you listen to them singing, and you see the deity, and you feel like you're in Vrindavan with Krishna, and you are in Vrindavan with Krishna.
咁所以如果你置身喺呢一個廟裏面，跟住你見到神像啦，跟住聽住呢一啲嘅音樂啦，你就感覺自己好似置身喺 Vrindavan 同 Krishna 一齊，而你的而且確係置身喺 Vrindavan 同 Krishna 一齊。
Finally, we're coming to the end of our time. Finally, I'll just mention there's chapter 11 is about recitation of the Bhagavatam.
咁最後咧，我提一提第十一篇文章咧，就係講去朗讀聖典博伽雅壇。
So we understand from the Bhagavatam itself that Shukadeva Goswami spoke the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit over a 7-day, 7-night period.
咁我哋知道 Shukadeva Goswami 咧係向 Parikshit Maharaj 咧講述博伽雅壇7日7夜嘅時間。
And that became a tradition. So to the present day, there are reciters of the Bhagavatam. Some will do for 7 days. They won't usually do 7 days, 7 nights, but there are these traditions of Bhagavad Katha.
咁所以咧就流傳落嚟呢一個嘅薄伽亞談嘅誦讀啊，咁佢哋可能未必7日7夜啦，但係就有呢個傳統去到傳承落嚟。
So our devotee Avadutta Priyadasi did research about this, and she interviewed kathakars, persons who perform. She interviewed people in audiences of these, and she interviewed people who sponsor. And like this, she did a kind of ethnographic picture of modern day recitation of the Bhagavatam.
所以我哋一位奉獻者咧，佢就做咗呢個田野嘅考察，就去到訪問呢一啲嘅誦讀者啦、聆聽者啦，同埋去到支持贊助呢一個嘅誦讀嘅人啦。咁咧就係啦，就做咗呢個嘅研究。
She also spent time attending there's a school, or more than one school, in Vrindavan, where they train young people to become Bhagavata Kathakars.
咁喺而家呢一個現今啊，咁咧喺 Vrindavan 有一個嘅學校咧，係特別咧去訓練一啲嘅年輕人咧，去到誦讀薄伽亞談。
And she mentions one of the interesting modern developments is that it's become more and more accepted that women will be also speaking the Bhagavatam.
咁佢亦都提到咧，而家一個趨勢咧，就係越嚟越多嘅女士咧都可以去到講述薄伽亞談。
Yes, some of the very talented Bhagavat Kathakars are some very young ladies I've seen.
有啲非常之優秀嘅薄伽亞談嘅誦讀者咧，其實係女士嚟嘅。
So, an overall point of the second half, we can say, the Bhagavata in the world, is the Bhagavatam is very much alive.
咁所以喺呢一本書裏面描述薄伽亞談喺呢個世界咧，其實仲好有生命力嘅。
It's we call this book Sacred Text and Living Tradition.
咁我哋將呢本書咧命名為一個嘅神聖嘅文字啦、文本啦，同埋呢一個嘅活着嘅傳統。
And so it's how to put this? Let's make the Bhagavata a living tradition in Hong Kong.
如我哋將呢一個薄伽亞談嘅傳統啊，可以讓佢活出嚟，喺香港能夠即展現活出佢嘅生命。
And that means, of course, step 1, read the Bhagavatam.
第一步睇薄伽亞談。
Become Shastra Chakshus, become a seer through the Bhagavatam.
成為咧呢一個嘅薄伽亞談，培養出咧薄伽亞談呢一種嘅目光視域。
And we can manifest the Bhagavatam in our own lives.
然之後咧，將薄伽亞談喺我哋嘅生命裏面咧去到展示。
By speaking the Bhagavatam.
就係去到講述啦、講解啦薄伽亞談。
And by finding ways to perform the Bhagavatam.
而且咧去到將呢一個嘅薄伽亞談咧，要係即係帶領出嚟啊，演繹出嚟。
Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for your attention.
His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj ki jai.